All right, good evening, everybody. This is the first time in a couple of weeks we're going to actually get to start on time. I don't know how it happened because I was running late, but we're here. I'm going to ask Elder Robinson, will you give us a word of prayer tonight, sir? We can all stand together and call this meeting to order. Sir. Everybody doing good? Good. All right. Anything going on anybody want to share or talk about? You can't tell me. All right. You can't tell me in church. You can't tell me in church. I probably don't need to know that. All right. Good deal. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get to the question then. Let's see. What preacher, we've been talking about these preachers. What preacher was put on a bread and water diet by an angry... Oh, I just put bread and water diet. I should have given y'all the rest of it, but I didn't read it at the time. Well, so what I'll do is take what answers you have, and we'll see what you come up with, and then I will give you what it actually did state, and give you, if somebody didn't get it, I'll give you what's here. But what did anybody get? I saw Sister Carter first. What you have? I don't know. Let's see. Is it Daniel? We're going to find out. You got Daniel? Look, how many got Daniel? All right. And that's what I'm kind of thinking ended up happening. Let's go ahead and read the Daniel text because that could be a part of this. Technically, by this book, no, Daniel's not right. But like I said, I could not read the other part, and that's probably the differentiation between the two. But the Daniel text, I know what y'all are referencing. Let's go ahead and look at that. It's probably around the 3rd or 4th chapter, I believe. What do y'all have? Y'all talk to me. What do you got? What you got there, Brian? You said Elijah. You went on out there, didn't you? You just went in another direction. What did you have, Elder? Elder, say that again. He got the right answer, y'all. But again, consider what you got. You got Ezekiel. There is an Ezekiel text. So it's good. Elijah. Okay. Well, let's break some of these down. Sister Lucas. Micaiah. Yeah, we're going to get to that one. Yeah. All right. Let's go back to the Daniel text first. Who had a Daniel text that you got the reference to the scripture? Who got a scripture reference? Nobody got a Daniel text. So y'all just guessing then? Oh. So y'all are basing it on the Daniel diet. Okay, now, why couldn't it be the Daniel diet though? The Daniel fast was basically for him to show that God was able to sustain him even though the people he was against was eating basically all the rich meats and all that stuff. Y'all remember that? So what was the Daniel diet consisting of? Does anybody remember? It was basically vegetables. Yeah. So and fruits and so those things. So would that be bread and water only? Not quite. All right. So that takes care of Daniel. What else we have? I heard of Ezekiel. Who had Ezekiel? All right, y'all want to share with me what you got with Ezekiel? All right, Ezekiel 4 and 8. Of course, Ezekiel's Old Testament, just after Lamentations and so forth. Ezekiel 4 and 8, you said? The 4th chapter. And...
Yeah. And behold, I will lay hands upon you, and you shall not turn yourself from one side to another till you have eaten the day you see. Also take wheat, barley, beans, lentils, village, and spelt, and put them into one vessel, and make bread with them, according to the number of the days that you shall lie on the side. 390 days you shall eat of it. And the food you eat shall be by weight, 20 shekels or a full half-pound a day, to be eaten at the fixed time each day. 11. You shall drink water by measure also, about 1/4 or the 6th part of a hin. You shall drink at a fixed time each day.
There you go. So that's why I would accept the Ezekiel text there, because that does reference the bread and the water, even though, again, there's a differentiation here in the text. Did y'all get that? That was Ezekiel 4, starting at verse 8, I think, to about 11. 8 through 11. All right, what you got? Who are we talking about here? Jeroboam, is that what you said? All right, what did you have again? 1 Kings, what? 1 Kings 13th chapter and the 15th verse. He's at 1 Kings 13 and 15. That's referencing it, but did he actually do it? Did he? Did he? That's what I was trying to see if he actually did do it. Okay. He did what?
He did, but he did it
Against, oh yeah. Okay, all right. We'll take that. There we go. Okay, wait. Okay, yeah.
I looked at that one, and the only reason why I excluded that one was it did say diet, like
Yeah.
they.
Yeah, and that's why, again, I'm accepting these because it does reference the bread and water, but this actually, when I actually was able to get the full scripture, the details here, I'll give it to you in a second. Do we have anything else besides Micaiah? Anybody have anything else besides Micaiah? All right, well, the full question was actually, what preacher was put on a bread and water diet by an angry hearer? And so that was Micaiah in his 1 Kings, the 22nd chapter. So let's turn there. 1 Kings, the 22nd chapter, 22nd. And let's see which verse is here. Yeah, verse 26 through 28. 1 Kings, 22nd chapter, starting at verse 26. Somebody can read that.
And the king of Israel said, take Micaiah,
the ruler of the city, and Josiah, the king's son, and say, this is what the king had said. Put this fellow in prison, and give him nothing but bread and water, like the current state.
All right.
And then
Yes, sir.
God declared, if you ever return, Satan, the Lord has not spoken through me. Then he added, mark my word, all you people.
All right. So that would have been the only thing that would have separated this one from the other ones. Is it gives the reference to what he was only restricted to eating, and it was by somebody that was angry. So that was the difference. But I appreciate the research. Y'all did a good job with that one. We went all out with that. I was hearing murmurings about the question all week long, so it had y'all thinking. All right, that's what it's about, is getting us to get familiar with the Bible and get to study. All right, I got the full question on this one, so this should be pretty easy. All right, who stood in the only pulpit mentioned in the Bible? Who stood in the only pulpit mentioned in the Bible? Who stood in the only pulpit mentioned in the Bible? All right. Got it? Excuse me. All right. So, we will discuss that and see what we come up with next week. And let's get into the study tonight. All right, so we are now in the confession. I had us starting at the government of a particular church. Is that right? Does anybody know if that's correct? On page 27, is that right? Okay. All right, so 2.50 on page 27, government of a particular church. What's a particular church? What's a particular church? Say that again? Us. Okay, all the Presbyterian. Okay, I get what you're saying. All the churches in the Presbyterian. Gotcha. All right. Let's identify and make sure we know what we're saying. Us being Blackford Chapel, I'm assuming is what you're talking about. Okay, what's another particular church in the Huntsville Presbyterian? Matthew's Chapel is another one. What was it? Yeah, Briarford, Union Chapel, Union Hill, all those. Those are each individual church is a particular church. when the confession references a particular church. The section before this one, 2.40, talked about organizing a particular church. This basically would be the guidelines and the parameters of a person or a group of people if they wanted to start a church in the presbytery. Those are the guidelines you go by. So if anybody wants to start a church, there you go, it's right there. All right. Let's see. So we are at 2.50. Government of a particular church. Each individual church has a government inside of that church. Y'all remember us talking about that? There's several courts, but each individual court has its own government inside of that court. All right. Does anybody know before we get into it, what is the government of Blackburn Chapel? Who the government of Blackburn Chapel would be? The church session. What's the church session? Elders. Y'all sure about that? And the deacons, you said? You sure about that? All right. We're going to find out. Let's go ahead and start reading. 2.51. Let's start there. All right, so what makes up the session? And the minister in charge, okay? Minister in charge meaning the minister that's better than everybody else? What does that mean? Well, what makes that person in charge? It seems like a silly question, but again, y'all, we got to know what that means. Talk to me, y'all. All right. Got to be ordained. That's the first thing. All right, what else got to happen? By who? Alright, that's why we gotta learn. We gotta learn. Anybody for sure about it? By the presbytery, I hear that, but that's actually not completely correct. Go ahead. You saying committee on ministry of presbytery? That's actually not really correct either. All right, let me give y'all a simple answer. It is the will of that church initially who expresses their desire to their church session. The session works with the church too now. All right, once the church, the members of the church and the session agree upon, they then submit to the presbytery. The presbytery analyzes the selection, make sure there's no particular reasons why that can't happen. Then they charge the committee on ministry to carry out the will of that church. Does that make sense? So the presbytery cannot select who your pastor is for you. It's up to the particular church to decide who the pastor is. And once the process is complete of being installed and ordained to that church, then that minister is recognized as the minister in charge. Doesn't mean that they're better than anybody else. It means that they're called to serve that particular church with the session. Does that make sense? Each detail is important so that you don't allow somebody to do something for you that you don't want done. Yes, sir. Okay, let me explain. I should wait till we get to it. But basically, if a church is without pastor, the presbytery can and usually will, if the church session asks for it or needs it, send a qualified, capable minister, ordained usually, to that church to serve in a short-term period while the selection process is taking place. Usually on an interim basis or as a supply pastor. We're going to talk about the difference later on. But that's what happens in that case. It's not the presbytery sending that person to be the pastor. It's for them to help while they're waiting for a pastor. Now, a lot of times that person ends up becoming the pastor, but that's not because the presbytery sent that person only to be pastor. Get that? Actually, Pastor Jones was sent here under those conditions. He was sent here on a short-term basis to help Blackburn Chapel, but he ended up becoming pastor for over 55 years. But that was, that was not because the presbytery just basically just made him. That's just the way it actually came into being, okay? All right. So that's the short answer. We're going to discover that a little bit more in the confession. But I want you, I'm serious, I want us to know what the difference is between what your rights are as a church versus what the presbytery can and will do for you. They are a big help to us and they are a support to us, but you have a voice inside of your church to get things done, okay? All right, let's go back. Where do we stop? Okay, let's go back there.
The session thus constituted is responsible to lead the members and all those ministries which belongs to the church.
All right, so now, pause right here. We now know who the session is. Now, this is important for you as a congregation to know what the duties of the church session is, and it's also important for the leaders in the church session to know. Why is it important for us to know what the duties are? We're going to read these, but why is it important to know? Order? What is it? Right, so that you can know what you can and can't do. Deacon Brown. Who you're working with. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Absolutely. Anybody else? It's important for those that are serving in that capacity to know what they're supposed to be doing, and it's important for the church to make sure those things are being done. Does that make sense? You can't know what somebody's supposed to do if we don't know what they're supposed to do. Nor can you actually do what you're supposed to do if you don't know what you're supposed to do. So these are the things, as per the confession of faith, that the church session should make sure is being properly done. Let's start with A.
Public worship, including praying, singing of praises, reading scripture, presenting tithes and offerings, preaching the word, and celebrating the sacrament.
All right, again, they're responsible to lead these endeavors. Does that mean they have to do it alone? So what does it mean if they're helping to lead those things? Making sure that they're done the right way. Okay, everybody understand that? All right, let's go ahead to B.
Christian education, including the study of scripture and Christian
Keep going.
activities of fellowship appropriate to the family of God.
Keep going.
Personal witness to unbelievers and to those out of fellowship with the church. Visitation of the sick, pastoral care of families, especially children and broken families. Stewardship of time, talents, and money, and the care and the use of the properties of the church. Exercise of this participation in the ministry of the church beyond the bounds of the local congregation and in such other ministries as appear needful. Leading the people in these ministries may be done by appointment to serve with others in various communities, representing different areas of ministry, and by directing them as individuals in the life of the church.
All right, that's good. All right, are those things, do you all feel like those things are being done properly in our church? Well, no, real talk. Do we feel like we're being properly represented by the session in those capacities? Y'all don't know? That's a problem if we don't know. This is a way for us to improve if we're not doing things the right way. But if we are, then we need to identify and make sure that things are being done to make sure that the church is operating appropriately. What would fall under pastoral care of families, especially disturbed and broken? Does anybody know what encompasses pastoral care? Speak, counseling? Okay, that's one thing. Anything else? Yes.
Basically, it's every care that would fall under the pastor's offices, but you're dealing with, instead of one person doing it all, multiple.
Absolutely. Care is the key word. It's the care of the people. I'm asking you all, do you all feel like the session is doing that? And the session, again, remember what your session is. What is the session? No, it's not just the elders. See, that's the problem. A lot of times we're putting responsibilities on one or two groups. The church session is the pastor and the elders together. So is that being done at your church? That's something to think about. I only hear a couple of answers, and there's a lot of people here. I can confidently say, fortunately, this church, it is being done, and it's not being done just by one person. The elders are doing a good job as well. I talked to a couple of the elders today about certain members that they have checked on that I haven't even been able to get in contact with. So they are helping me personally, and I believe they helped Pastor Jones as well. But a lot of times we try to put this on one or two people, either the pastor or one or two elders, where it should be the entire session working together to make sure that the care and the concern of the church is being taken care of. Okay? Yes.
I'm not a member. I would just like to speak as an individual person. I remember when you guys delegated these sessions, the different members to see after. Now, in response to them taking care of those people that they're supposed to see about, do the people know that this is the person you contact? Because how can the elders know that you're in need if you don't reach out to your elders? But as far as those who are sick in the hospital, I've known them to go and visit, the hospitals. But if you're at home, you don't know unless you reach out. Does that make sense? So I don't know if that's where we're kind of like hesitant on it. Maybe it's because they don't feel as though maybe the family care is not taken care of. Well, how do we know if there's a need in the family if the family doesn't reach out?
So what's your question?
My question is is it the hesitation in it, in the pastoral care? Is the hesitation there because maybe some people know of families who aren't being taken care of? And if that's the case, then are you telling the family that this is your representative? As a problem?
Yes, ma'am.
I remember sometimes they could used to take the elders and take so many members.
Yes.
For elders.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Their contact with that group of people.
Yes. Yeah, that's still taking place, and I can help explain a little bit of where we are in that process. One of the first things we did as a church session together when in 2015, whatever the year was, 16, whatever, is we purged the membership, the church membership, to get an accurate account of our church. We were reporting numbers as high as I think 500 and something, but we purged it to make sure that we were given an accurate count of all of our members. And we assessed it to be around 330 or something like that or whatever. And then since then, we've come up to somewhere between 420, somewhere around in there. But anyway, what we have now done is, I think a year or two ago, we assigned a certain number per elder. And what we're doing right now, once we have these new officers installed, after the first of the year, I plan to redo all of that. We got to do that anyway. And what I plan to do, I think I mentioned it this session, but we haven't formulated a full plan, is at one of the members, our first members meeting in 2019, is to have the elders connect with their members then, so that everybody will know who their session rep is, and that elder also is charged with connecting with them, but it's also up to the people to connect with that elder so that they can work together. And the ideal way for it to work, every church can improve on this, is to the needs of your family should be communicated with that elder. The elders are always in contact with me, so that information would funnel up to me, or if there's an immediate need, obviously I can be contacted as well. But the ideal situation with as many members as we have is for that connection and that relationship to be established. There has to be trust both ways so that everybody's needs are properly being cared for. Does that make sense? One second, think about it. If you remember in the Bible when Moses' father-in-law kind of got on him for doing way too much, and he kind of advised him that it's good to have people to help you carry out. It's unwise for one person to try to take care of everything, because nobody can do those things effectively. Okay? So that's why we can always learn and improve on these things so that we can make sure that things are being done properly. Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Absolutely, yes, sir.
Elders, members of the yard, my session
Absolutely. That's the signs of a healthy church. And like I said, we do have that dynamic in place. Obviously, we can always improve on things, but let's appreciate it and celebrate what we do have and make sure we're using what we do have so that we can all effectively care for each other. Okay? Good questions. Any other questions or comments?
I was just saying that I do appreciate that y'all put that in place, even though I'm not there.
She really want to be a member of that. All right. Okay, so now we're ready for 2.52. Page 28, 2.52.
In a particular church, it is without a pastor, the elders who constitute the session are themselves responsible, within the limits of their office, to lead the people to all the ministries that belong to the church.
All right, y'all got that? In a particular church, again, an individual church without a pastor, who's responsible for the well-being of the church? The session at that point, which was only the elders because there is no pastor to work with them. We talked about that a little bit last week. They would still be responsible for carrying out all the ministries of the church. Every little detail of the church would be responsibility of the session. Questions on that? All right, now we're ready for 2.53.
A congregational meeting of the members of a particular church shall be convened for the following purposes: to determine the type of tenure of office for elders and deacons, to nominate, elect, or accept the resignation of elders and deacons, to establish a quorum of the session, or diaconate as less than a majority of the members, to recall an elder or deacon whose service is no longer acceptable to the church, where state law or presbytery requires it, to authorize the sale and purchase of church property.
All right, so what does all that mean? Congregational meeting. What is a congregational meeting? It's what we call our members' meeting. It's the same thing, all right? So it can be convened for any of the following purposes. Oh, let's go ahead and read 2.54. That's the other reason it can be convened as well.
A congressional meeting may be convened also to provide an opportunity for communication between the session and the congregation on other matters, but without the procedure of vote.
All right, so it can be convened or held for all of those reasons. Does anybody have any questions about any of those reasons? Or need clarity? Yes, ma'am.
Where say the determine the type of tenure of office of elders and deacons.
All right. Okay. How long can your elders and deacons serve?
Different churches have different.
Very good. Absolutely. You were absolutely right. There are some churches, and we're talking again about our presbytery or our denomination, where there are tenures, like your congressmen or like your elected officials. They serve for a certain period of time, and then they either are re-elected or there are others that are nominated in that place. You have the same option. You know, here traditionally at our church, I believe it's been kind of an understood thing that people just continuously serve unless there's a reason why they cannot or that the church sees fit that they should not serve. But it's obviously now that we know it's up to the people to decide the tenure of the officers. Okay, does that answer your question? Absolutely. See, we're learning something. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know about the 70 years in my mind. Is that somewhere 70 years?
Oh, it's to be determined. Each church is different. What's that?
I said, the elders went down.
Now, it's up, like I said, it's up to each church to decide. At the presbytery level, on the committees there, I would say we serve 3-year terms. Up to, like me personally, I'm on the committee on ministry. My max is next year, so it's 9 years is the max. And then you would roll off of a committee, and then somebody would be nominated in your place. But at each 3-year interval, I'm either re-elected or somebody else could be elected in that spot. Okay, so that's how the boards work at the presbytery level. And I think like the moderators is every year, isn't it? Every 2 years, every 2 years. It's a 2-year term, and they're, okay, so it's, yeah, so, right, so it's to be determined, and there's no prerequisite. I mean, obviously, if the people are doing an excellent job and there's no reason to, then that's fine as well. It's not a requirement, it's just the options that are there. Yes, Sister Carter. E? D. All right, D says to recall an elder or deacon whose service is no longer acceptable. What does that mean?
What would constitute to be no longer acceptable? What would it?
Anybody want to answer that before I get the actual answer? Thank you. That's why we just read them duties right there. Is if those things are not being done, that's really, well, that's not the only reason, and we can get to rules of discipline later. But basically, on duties alone, if these things are not being fulfilled, then that could be determined to be them not fulfilling the needs of that church. The other thing would be obviously disciplinary reasons. If there's some disciplinary actions or some personal things that have taken place or that a person feels is appropriate to bring charge against someone, then going through the proper order, which we will learn, that person could be recalled or basically removed from office for those reasons, after the appropriate actions are taken. Okay? Does that answer your question? All right, any other questions? All right, good deal. So those are the reasons typically for a congregational or a members meeting. 2.55, let's go ahead and read that part.
The congregational meeting of the members of the church shall be held when authorized by the session at request of 50% of total membership of the church, or when directed by the Presbyterian.
All right, listen to that. It can be either convened by the session calling a meeting or the membership. If 15% of the membership feels there's a need for a meeting, one can be called, or if the Presbytery directs it. So if our membership is 400, what is the required number of people to ask for a members meeting if it was needed?
60.
Absolutely. If 60 or more members would have to unanimously decide there is a sufficient enough need, then they could make sure that a membership meeting is called together to address whatever needs to be addressed. Make sense? Questions, comments? All right, keep going, Xavier.
Notice of the meeting shall be given either by written notice to the entire membership at least once a week before the meeting, or by announcement on the third Sunday before the meeting, or by some other method which the session judges to be adequate notice. The minister in charge or in the church without pastor, a minister designated by Presbytery, shall serve as moderator of the congregational meeting. The clerk of the session shall record the minutes of the meeting, which shall be approved at the next meeting session, and made a part of its records. A quorum for a congregational meeting shall consist of those members present at the appointed time and place.
All right, just give the parameters to make sure that a membership or a congregational meeting is constitutionally done correctly. And I can, again, say that most of the meetings that I've been a part of since I've been pastor, I feel like have effectively been done by these guidelines, okay? What is a quorum? What is a quorum? I know y'all hear that word a lot. What is a quorum? Well, I'll tell you what that means in a minute. But a quorum in and of itself, say that again, Jalinka, what did you say?
It is half plus one.
Okay, half plus one is technically correct. So what that basically constitutes majority. So right now we have 13 elders elected. So what would be a quorum for the elders, for us to have a session? It has to be at least 7 present in order for us to constitutionally conduct business. Does that make sense? It has to be the majority. Anybody know why? If you have to vote. To properly represent the body in and of itself, and to make sure that it has the sufficient number to conduct business. Okay? So that means, well, let me ask you all. So if we have 6 elders at a session meeting, can we meet? Trick question, wasn't it? You can meet, but you cannot transact any business. Okay? You can meet and discuss, make announcements, or discuss things that need to be done, but no actions can be constitutionally taken. If it is done, it's unconstitutional.
Well, if you had 5, could you use that?
No, it has to be at least the majority for a quorum.
I know odd numbers always what you need to,
Well, when you have to have a quorum present, it's not just the odd number, it's the majority of the overall number. So if you had 50 people in a group, in order to have a quorum present, you would need how many? 26. Okay, so it has to be at least, like basically what she said, half plus one more to make it the majority. Okay? Is that good? But Mother Cable is right. It's usually good when you elect to make sure that there's an odd number so that in case of a vote, there should not really be a tie. Okay? All right. Any questions or comments about
You're talking about the session or committee?
Well, any committee. Anytime you're elected for a committee or anything, it's usually good to try to have an odd number. To try. It's not a requirement, but it's good to do it so that you can kind of offset your votes to make sure it's not a tie. And then going back to what you said about...
So this last sentence, that's what the point I want to make a point about the congregation.
Okay.
But a quorum at a congregation meeting.
Right. Wait a minute.
The last sentence.
Right. A quorum for a congregational meeting. No. Clerk of the session shall record the minutes and approve the session. A quorum for a congregation should consist of those members present at that appointed time and place. Yeah. A quorum for a congregational meeting is basically however members show up that night. For the meeting. Now, the earlier part, which is what I was getting confused on, C, up there on 2.53, one of the reasons that a congregational meeting can be called is to establish a quorum of the session or diaconate as less than the majority. If the members, going back to that example, like 5, you asked about 5, if there is a need for business to be taken care of with less than 7, then it would have to be approved at a congregational meeting for that to be acceptable. Does that make sense? There would have to be a congregational meeting or a members meeting called, and then the members would have to say, yeah, it's okay for business to take place with less than the official quorum. Does that make sense? That's what C is talking about. Otherwise, it's understood by your church session that they cannot conduct any business if they're right now less than 7 elders present. Now, obviously, when we elect the new elders, it'll be a little bit different. But right now, they have accepted the rule of making sure that there is a quorum present before any business is transacted. And we establish that in the meeting, and we do it for the records as well. Okay? All right, good questions. Any other? Yes, sir.
And I guess since you emphasized the seat, but if the congregation wants our quorum of the session to be less than
Right.
in a member meeting,
Yes.
they would have to take action.
Right.
Then the session could.
Absolutely. Did y'all hear that? If the congregation wanted business to be able to take place with less than a quorum, they can do that, and they would do it at the members' meeting in that setting. Okay? All right. Any other questions? Good questions. I want us to have clarity on everything. All right, 2.60 just basically identifies the duties and the responsibilities of ministers, ordained ministers, and then ministers becoming ordained. And it talks about some of the offices of ministers. Are there any questions or anybody want me to go over that? I didn't really plan on going over that, but if you got questions about ministers, those responsibilities are there. 2.63 basically identifies what the minister in charge or the pastor's responsibilities are, kind of like what the session did earlier. I'm willing to go over those. Y'all to make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to do too. We can go over those. But for time, I plan to move to the elders and deacons. Do y'all want to go over that? Y'all sure? Well, read and make sure we're doing it right now. All right. Let's see. So we're ready for page 30, 2.70. Talking about elders. Mainly, again, it's always good to have a refresher for our current elders, but we have several candidates that are about to become elders and want to make sure they have a full understanding of what that office would entail, and you as the members to make sure that your offices of elders are properly being represented. So let's read down through some of these. 2.71.
Elders are the immediate representatives of the people, elected by them to share with ministers in the government and leadership of the church. The elders who comprise they share with the minister in charge of the pastoral oversight of a particular church.
All right, we just talked about that. All right, let's go to the next section.
In caring for and leading the congregation which they serve, elders shall be particularly attentive to persons who have not confessed Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, those who are spiritually weak, and those who need to be instructed in their faith. They shall visit the people in their homes, praying with and for them, especially for the sick, those who mourn, and others in need. They should encourage the people by word and example to share in the worship, study, witness, and service of the church through a faithful stewardship of their time, talents, and money. They should inform the pastor of any concerns that need his or her attention.
All right, any questions or comments? All right, let's move to the next section.
Persons who fill the office of elder may be male or female, young or old. Elders share the same vocation that belongs to all Christians to be witnesses to the gospel, but the vocation of this office places an additional responsibility of leadership upon them. They should exemplify the gospel by...
All right, let me hold you up there, Sister Wade. Go back to that last sentence there.
Elders share that.
Yeah.
Elders share in the same vocation that belongs to all Christians to be witnesses to the gospel, but the vocation of this office places an additional responsibility of leadership upon them.
All right, what does that mean? Are they different than anybody else? Absolutely. It's not that anybody who serves as an elder is above anyone else. It's just that they have a different set of responsibilities that have been placed before them. Does that make sense? That's recognized by God, that's recognized by them, and that should be what they embrace as they carry out the role of that office. It's not to go around to everybody and tell everybody, I'm an elder. You do what I say. No, it's to accept that there is a set of responsibility that they take seriously as well as I do to carry out the will of God and the affairs of His people. Okay? Does that make sense? Questions or comments? All right, let's keep going.
They should exemplify the gospel by their good character, sound faith, wisdom, maturity of judgment, discretion, conversation, knowledge of the doctrine and government of the church, and competency to perform the duties of the office.
All right, any questions or comments? All right, next section.
Persons who accept the responsibilities of the office of elder should be engaged in such study and preparation as are appropriate to the office, and during their tenure on the session shall continue to study in order better to perform their duties.
All right, that's really important. No office, let's talk about elders, but any office, anything that you do, in order to really do it effectively for God, you should always be in training and study mode. Amen, somebody.
Amen.
I don't care how long you have served. Pastor Jones even used to tell me this, and he was in ministry well over 50 years. You don't know everything, and you can always learn, but we can only learn if we're willing to learn. And you become a more effective leader if you realize you can always learn. Okay? Any questions or comments? All right, so that basically encompasses the roles and the responsibilities of an elder. All right, 2.80 focuses on deacons. Let's read a little bit about the responsibilities of deacons.
Deacons are elected by the people and ordained to lead the church in its care of poor and others in need, administering the funds provided by the church for these purposes. The ministry is given to the church by Jesus Christ, who came to serve rather than to be served. Through the care of the poor and others in need, the church gives witnesses and compassionate love of God shown in Jesus Christ.
questions on that? All right. Next section.
In churches desiring to do so, the session may grant to the deaconate,
Is diaconate or?
power to formulate budgets and assume other financial responsibilities.
Questions? All right, let's keep going.
Person who fill the office of deacon may be male or female, young or old. Deacons shall have sound judgment and character, compassion for those in need, availability to people, and deep abiding faith in Jesus Christ, whose example in ministry they follow.
All right, before we read the rest of that, let me just say about deacons. It's going to be hard to be an effective deacon if you don't care about people. Sounds crazy to say inside of the church, but not everybody inside of the church is concerned for other people. So in order to truly be an effective deacon, you have to have a heart that genuinely cares. Now, on the other side of that, you cannot be a pushover. Because unfortunately, everybody who acts like they need help don't always need the kind of help we need to give. So we have to have the proper balance to make sure that we are loving people, but loving them in a way that's actually helping them. And our deacons are doing an outstanding job of that. I can commend them for that. So just wanted to point that out. It's a balance that's needed in order to effectively accomplish what's needed for the deacons. Okay? Questions or comments? All right. Let's keep going there.
Person who accepts the responsibility of the office of deacon shall engage in such study and preparation as are appropriate to the office, including their tenure on the diaconate, shall continue to study in order better to perform their duties.
All right, again, the same challenge to elders and any other leaders. It's important for deacons or any leader in the church, I can't say that enough, to continuously study to show thyself approved and to effectively learn new ways to carry out the overall universal message of God. Okay? Questions, comments? All right, 2.84.
The desirability for a diaconate is to be determined by each particular church. In churches where it is impractical to create a diaconate, the duties of the office of deacon shall be assumed by the elder. If a diaconate is created, no person shall serve simultaneously on the session and the diaconate.
All right. Is it a requirement to have deacons at a CPCA church? That just told you it's not a requirement. If it's not feasible, if the numbers aren't allowing you to have efficient deacon representation, who does the welfare of the people fall to? The session. The session, okay? They can carry out those roles. But if there is a deacon or diaconate established, nobody from the session should be also doing deacon activities. Does that make sense? Or vice versa. Our deacons make reports to us if there's a church session, but they're not members of the church session. Okay. Questions, comments? Yes. She said, is there a place in the confession that talks about a probational period for elders and deacons? Is there? It's not in here. Not for them, not for elders. There's a probational period for ministers as they're being trained to become ordained, but there are no established time periods for that. But that's basically what we're doing now. And we kind of established we want to also give our new officers time to get acclimated to the office as well. Once they're installed, they are official members in that capacity. So they have the full rights and privileges of any other person in that capacity. But we plan to support them and help them learn their way through everything. We don't plan to tell them the next day, all right, you got to figure this out. You know? But to answer your question, no, there are no established parameters for a time period. Deacon Brown? We just asked that, didn't we? The correct answer is you serve the tenures that's been set by your church. If there is no tenure set, then you serve until you're not effectively doing it anymore or unable to do it anymore. That's the correct answer. Okay? All right. Yes.
Will the new elders or deacons be paired with the older person? Say, for example, for mentoring, or I don't want to say training, I want to say mentoring. Say, for example, if they're ordained, and then, say, I lose my mother all of a sudden, and then a younger person is my elder, or my elder, or my deacon. Will that person come to me by himself, or will he come with another person?
Does anybody from session 1 answer that? Y'all want me to answer? Go ahead, Elder.
We are our brother teacher. So happens when you all be on one of the younger guys, listen, that do happen. They gonna probably call one of us because they gonna be humble enough. If they don't know what to do, they gonna be humble enough to call the pastor, call one of us. Because when I was first coming into this, if I did get a call, I went to the pastor, some of you guys was already there. Because when you're concerned, you go get help. You don't get a call and go nowhere and I know what to do.
Yes, sir. And yes, I concur with that. No person elected to any office, whether it's new or they've been there 40, 50 years, whether they're 15 or whether they're 87, will be left to try to figure things out by themselves. They will be offered and they will be guided to make sure that they're doing things appropriately. And they won't even have a list of members. I just told y'all that they're personally responsible for a few months after they're installed. So there will be a time period where they're taught, and this is for all the new elders and deacons, where they're taught what to do, how to do it, they're basically already kind of been advised to pay attention and talk to and get counsel from some of the current officers to draw off of that wisdom so that they can effectively carry out the affairs of the church and this people. And I urge you, I'm going to say this, and it's not just for any 1 or 2 people, it's for every elder and deacon that you elect. Trust them until you have a reason not to. Trust them, and more importantly, trust the God in them. And if it's not being done properly, then obviously follow through with that. But let's trust our leaders. And leaders, let's trust the people so that we can establish a relationship where we're all trusting God. Okay? But that's a good question. But to answer that, yes, they will have an opportunity to learn and to grow and to make sure that they're not placed in a situation where they feel like they're by themselves or they have a chance to make a bad decision that would be counterproductive to somebody. Yes. Sure.
I remember Pastor Jones, when I was newly into the church and into his family, there was time that he had to go to certain people's house, and I'm going to say it just like I saw it, like a female. And if the female was at home by herself, he would never go to that house by himself.
Amen.
And that's kind of like what our young people need to know. There was some times that he came and got me and he wasn't members of our church, just because I was available and I was a female.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be caught
By
in a
himself.
situation.
That's
where
good.
He couldn't explain.
Yeah. And those are good points of wisdom to pass on, especially to our younger ministers and elders and deacons. I had a conversation with some people today about that very thing. You're right, to make sure it's not that you are doing anything, but you never want to put yourself in a situation where somebody can make some accusations against you or the enemy. The Bible says don't give room to the devil or the appearance of things. So I appreciate you saying that. That's absolutely a wise thing to do, to teach our young. When I told the session that it's important for us, this is a while back, for us to start considering new leaders in the church, it was for those reasons, so that they can draw wisdom off of what we have now before we have to do it out of need and they don't know what to do. So it's important for us to share with them, but at the same time, let's trust that they're learning and getting it and give them an opportunity to also grow into it. I saw a hand over here. Yes, sir. Well, yes and no. I mean, it's not necessarily scripture verbatim that says it in that context, but wisdom is all through the Word of God to teach us the importance of surrounding ourselves with proper counsel and proper guidance. So it's right to do, and you can support it with the Word as far as what your intent is. So I agree with you on that. Oh, yeah. Okay. I have to find that then. All right. Yes, ma'am.
I think the scripture when like if you had a problem with somebody, you go to them, but you take somebody along with you.
Yeah, I remember that.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah. That's
ask
good.
them, and then if they don't, you take somebody along.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. I do briefly want to go ahead and try to get into the next section where the election and ordination of the elders and deacons. We got a few more minutes. Let's go ahead and start reading through this. 2.91.
And the organization of the civil church and the elders and deacons shall be nominated and elected by the members participating in the organization.
All right. Organization of a particular church. What does that mean? What condition would that be?
Would it be for usher, choir, or something like that?
Now, this is talking about only if a new church is being formed. That first part, yeah. Organization of a particular church. If a new church was being started, then the elders and deacons would be nominated and elected by the members participating with that new church. Does that make sense? All right, so now the rest of it talks about other cases, all right?
In all other cases, it's proper and advisable for the session to nominate or to cause to be chosen a committee of the congregation at large to nominate to the congregation at a meeting, call to elect elders and deacons, persons to fill these offices. Other nominations may be made by other members of the church with the approval of the persons being nominated. The vote may be taken on the nominees at the meeting in which they are presented or at a subsequent congregational meeting. Unless by the vote shall be by secret ballot with a majority vote cast necessary for election. When there are more nominees in position to be filled, those receiving the highest number of votes are elected.
All right, this highlights the process of electing officers, and I probably should have waited because I wanted to go into this a little bit, but I do want to talk about this a little bit because there were a few questions that came up when we did elect officers, and this is what we basically went by. Okay, it says it's proper and advisable for the session to nominate. That's kind of the first thing. Or the other option would the session could also choose a committee from the congregation to assess different people to possibly be candidates for officers. Okay, does that make sense? And then say they could nominate to the congregation at a meeting to call to elect elders and deacons and persons to fulfill that office. All right. At that meeting, though, it also says that other nominations may be made by other members of the church. So, like in that example, even though the session recommends people to be nominated for an office, does that mean that those are the only people that can be nominated? No. Not at all. Any member at that meeting is fully free to make sure that they have an opportunity to nominate anybody. As a matter of fact, if you're ever in a setting where that option is not given to you, it's unconstitutional. Does that make sense? Questions or comments? All right. On the next page, it says that the vote may be taken on the nominees at the meeting in which they are presented or at a subsequent congregational meeting. Again, that question came up, and constitutionally, were we correct? We were. But I told the people that night, they asked the question after things had happened. We could have waited, but you have to speak up at the times when that option is available. Does that make sense? Once the action is done, it's done. So again, this is why we need to know these things so we can make sure that we get every opportunity to get things done in a way that's comfortable for us, so that you can make sure that your voice is being heard. Does that make sense? Questions or comments? And then it says, unless by acclamation, the vote should be by secret ballot, which means basically if it's unanimous or something, with the majority of votes being cast in order for election. I don't want to get to the next section. But any questions on the process, though? Okay. One thing I will say, the session now, we already talked about this some. Even though that particular night we felt like we did it in a way that was peaceable with what we had been seeking God on and by the Constitution, we also were charged, I charged them and I charged us, to listen and always take into consideration feedback we give. But at the same time, the responsibility of this session is to make sure that this is respected and covered and that we're seeking God. So that's what they're typically going to be operating by. But when those opportunities are presented at members' meetings or whatever forum, you have the right, but you got to know what you got the right to do. And this teaches us that, okay? Questions, comments? We learning something? Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to stop right there. I don't want to go to the next section until we have time to properly cover it. So stop right there. And it'll talk to us about what to do as far as get ready for installation. All right. I appreciate y'all's input, your time. And like I said, my main thing is I just want us to learn as much as possible so that we can better be equipped to do what's needed to be stewards of what's happening here at our church. All right. Any announcements or anything need to be made? Yes, sir.
On Monday night, we start after the choir for citywide revival. So next Monday night, it'll be at Union Hill, but it'll be at 7 o'clock, I was told. My brother checked it, still 6:30, it'll be at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock at Union Hill PB on Winchester. Union Hill PB at 7 p.m. for the citywide revival. Yes. Yes, I will. Thank you for sharing. I forgot. Yes, I will. Oh yeah, I will. I will be officially on vacation starting Monday, the 8th, after we have session. So I won't be here next week. So we will still have class. I will make provisions for us to. We will not study this, so I want to wait until I'm here to make sure that questions are being answered. So we will still have class. I don't want y'all to start skipping and carrying on because I ain't here. I'm on vacation. Y'all ain't on vacation. So we will still have class and everything next Wednesday. And I will be back on the 17th. Okay. Thank you. I forgot. Any other? What's that? Yeah, man. Hallelujah. I'll veto that. All right. All right. Any other announcements or anything else need to happen? Yes. Yes, we will have baptism Sunday. We have 2 candidates that will be baptized Sunday so far. Yes, ma'am. I'm not sure yet. I'll figure that out on the next week or so. I'm not sure yet. All right. Any other questions? Any other announcements? All right. Now we can prepare for our benediction, for our closing prayer. Any prayer reports? Prayer requests? All right. We sure will. Absolutely. Nice. Okay. Sure will.
We have Mr. Wallace, she says she's a lady, with MS, and she's
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Everyone's prayer, because I will honor to do a new endeavor on Sunday. So just pray that God be with me and allow me to do what He will have me to do.
Amen. Anybody else? Amen.
Small, yesterday she did the same.
Praise God. Awesome. Anything else?
Cousin who was just diagnosed with breast cancer.
Okay. All right. Well, we all know the power of prayer, y'all. So we're praying to a God that we know well, and we know fully well what He's able to do. So let's pray in that type of faith.
Good man for prayer.
Amen.
Father God, we have confidence in you that you're able to do exceeding abundantly above all we can ask, pray, and think, Lord God. Father God, we pray for all of those who have had prayer requests, Lord God, mentioned and not mentioned, Lord God. And because you know all things, you know how to fix all things. So fix it according to your perfect will. And Father God, a special prayer for the young people, Lord God, because I was told, Lord God, what goes around comes around, and things that are happening now aren't new. Father God, we're starting to see it more prevalent now. These young people are facing the same hatred that was once faced years ago, Lord God, for violence, for equality. So God, we pray that you give our children strength to, Lord God, just to look away from the enemy and not to just come back, but to look away and to have faith in you, God. We pray that you will continue to build and bless this church mightily, Lord God. Its congregation, Lord God, and those extended, Lord God. We pray that you will continue to lead and guide us, Lord God, in the spirit of truth, that we may be a light to